What's your OFCK? I am an asshole moment. Someone I hadn't talked to in years came up to me and started telling me about how they haven't been doing that good lately and that they found out they have cancer. Well, I was at work and only half paying attention, so after he stopped talking I said that's good. Haven't seen him since. Years ago I went into a Hot Topic and as I was at the register, the girl working started telling me about all the new Metallica shirts they had gotten. For some reason, I told her I wasn't really into wearing band shirts anymore. Which was mostly true. And even though I didn't mean to, it came out sounding really snobbish. At the time, I thought her reaction was kinda strange, even accounting for my accidental condescension. Shortly after I left the store I remembered I was wearing a Nin shirt. I was driving down a road and a lot of people were honking and yelling at me on the street. I got angry and flipped a bunch of people off and honked back. In early high school. Late 90s. So if you got a girl's number it was the house number. I called a girl's house and her dad answered. She was out. But I noticed his speech was a bit slow and slurred. Next day at school I mentioned I had called and asked if her dad had been drinking. Well, turns out he didn't drink much since his stroke. Still feel awful about that. I was drunk at a pub and shouted for the band to play Free Bird. They stopped in the middle of the song they were playing, started up Free Bird and called me up on stage to sing it. I froze, forgot all the lyrics and made an absolute ass of myself. Props to that band though. I was making fun of an old guy I'd seen outside our school at a basketball tournament to some friends in the locker room. He looked and talked like Farmer Fran from The Waterboy. Turned out to be the dad of one of the guys I was talking to. Still can't even think of that movie without it bringing up endless amounts of shame. Broke up with my first girlfriend who was really attached to me. Just by ignoring her. I feel so bad. I was just a kid, but that was a harsh treatment. When you fight with your friend over something, leave. What's your name? I asked. Shara. Trying to be playful. Oh cool. Like a Cicero with a lisp. I have a lisp. My name is Sarah. Oof. Posting on Reddit sometimes makes me reread my shit and realize I'm being an asshole. I don't do it on purpose. But I think years of reading and writing posts on the internet has tainted my tone. Try Kegels. And tone your taint instead. When I realized the reason I've lost so many friends is that I'm so shitty at getting back to people. I was in the army. Making fun of a guy. Said he couldn't even get a medal for something in the Special Olympics. He then pointed out his daughter was in the Special Olympics. I profusely apologized. And he accepted. But it still keeps me awake at night. This entire year. Been recovering from my divorce last year and it forced me to take a hard, honest look at myself and all the shit I used to do and how I actually treated those around me. A lot of tough to swallow pills. But a lot of much needed reflection taken place. For years I used the same thing happened to me line whenever someone opened up to me. Instead of just shutting up and listening to them. But yeah. Working on it. Edit. Gosh. I was rewarded for being an asshole to other people. Thank you, but also I'm V. At the movies once it was just me and friends and one other group sitting in front. There was a guy in front that kept slurping on an icy really loudly. Like he just really wanted to get every last drop. After a few minutes I got really agitated and made a super obnoxious and loud slurping sound to make them aware that it was annoying me. Literally as soon as I did it I saw that it was a disabled man and his parents and he had a suction tube. I was so ashamed I walked out of the theater quietly whispering to them I'm so sorry. I never went back in. I developed a pretty serious drinking problem. And in one day everyone finally had enough. I got fired. Kicked out of my apartment. Disowned by my friends and my family. I was left utterly alone. And homeless. With $2,000. And a 1986 Volvo station wagon. It was coordinated between everyone in my life. And it f***ing hurt. But I wouldn't take any of it back for the world. Things are far better now. But that was the sort of life event that is supposed to change you. And I let it do so for the better. I asked two black ladies at work what language they were speaking. I am really big into languages and I felt like I hadn't heard the one they were speaking before. English. They were speaking English and they just both happened to have really thick accents. I blamed my fart on a mentally challenged boy in 5th grade. My girlfriend recently dumped me. Looking around my room and seeing all the things they bought me and being reminded of all the things they did for me and then noticing I hardly did anything in return. I told my friend that she shouldn't use medication for her mental illness because I was convinced she could just use sheer will to get through it. It was an arsehole move to make her second guess getting professional help to address her mental health issues. I wish I just instead offered support instead of trying to fix it when she mentioned the side effects. When I had no idea what I was talking about. This was when I was a teenager and thought I knew everything. Edit. Just wanted to add that I offered we face it together. That we would find the root of why she felt so anxious, depressed and we'd squash it. I thought that medication was temporary and wouldn't help in the long run. Yet the assistance of a 16-year-old with no medical license could? I just didn't want my friend to suffer, but it was so wrong to try to substitute a medical professional. I rang and paid for a mowing service, and when the guy rocked up, I started telling him that I can't mow the lawn myself anymore as my injured ankle would play up and hurt for the rest of the day. Then he got out of the car and I realized he was an amputee from the knee down. While hungover at a breakfast diner, the waitress asked me if I wanted a box for my food. I said sure. And she asked what size of box I needed. Without thinking, I say I dunno. I'm not a box expert. Immediately felt like an asshole after that. At HS graduation, a friend of mine was a foreign exchange student from Italy. And her parents were at the ceremony. I went up to them and just shouted, "Hi. I love Italians. IDKY. I just felt like a douchebag in that moment. My buddy wanted to set me up with a new co-worker of his. I got to his apartment early and started getting drunk with his roommate. He called and said they were going to be late. He said, "She's a bigger girl. Don't mention her weight." He had told me this previously as well. By the time they showed up, I was pretty drunk and I wanted to make a good impression. I said, "You're not nearly as fat as they said you were." She turned around and fled. One day while I was walking on the street, some kids kicked a ball in my direction. I was going to pass it back, but I thought one of the kids closer would just get it. I decided to keep walking. I looked back at the kid and I could see the look of disappointment on his face. I felt like biggest asshole on the planet for a few days. I still feel bad thinking about it. My girlfriend and I were walking past a middle school in downtown Manhattan. As we pass by the fence, some guy asks me, "Hey, what time is it?" I say 2:00. The man starts ringing a bell and shouts, "All right. Everyone inside." My girlfriend smacks me on the arm and says it's only 1:54. I was the asshole who cut these kids' recess short by 6 minutes. I used to tend bar. I was very busy at a freestanding bar. I was literally surrounded. I went to wait on the next customer. I made eye contact and asked what I could get him as I turned to throw something away. He gave no response. I asked again as I started wiping up a spot someone had vacated. No response. This kept going a couple more times. As customers were building up, I turned with a bit of attitude and said something to the effect of, "Sir, I'm getting deeper in the weeds and all these other people are getting pissed. You need to order or move aside so others can." He then informed me that he was deaf, and as I kept turning away, he couldn't read my lips. OFCK. I am an asshole. Every time my kid asks to try what I'm eating, I always say that it's spicy and he won't like it, so I don't have to share. Nearly every tantrum I had as a kid. A lady told me she was hospitalized for months after she fell asleep at the wheel and drove her car off a cliff. She said she woke up right when the wheels went over. And I asked her, was it worth it? She stared at me, wondering what I meant. So I continued. Now you know what it's like to fly in a car. When I realized I picked a side that benefited me more over the one which would be the correct side multiple times in arguments. I grew up fairly poor, and as a kid, the concept of money didn't mean much to me. I just knew we had less things than the other kids in my class. So when the Nintendo started getting super popular, I asked my mum for one. She obviously refused since we couldn't afford it, but apparently, later on that evening I had drawn a picture of a Nintendo along with a comic strip of me and my mum playing a game on it together. Apparently she had stayed up that entire night crying because she had felt guilty about not being able to afford it, as my dad told me years later. I was running a bit late for work one afternoon, and traffic was oddly heavy for part of the drive. All these cars were driving like 15 under the speed limit. As soon as the road opened to 2 lanes, I slammed on the gas pedal and flew around this ridiculously slow line of cars. Until I got to the car in the front driving so slow and realized it wasn't just some slow asshole. It was a hearse, and I just flew past a funeral procession. In my defense, everyone I'd seen before had their hazards on and little flags on each car, so this sort of thing doesn't happen. But I felt awful. My girlfriend broke up with me because I'm a terrible person. Few weeks later I realized she was right and I'm a complete asshole. Teacher here walked into my co-worker's classroom, loudly and obnoxiously mocking a man from the district who is supposed to help us with instruction and provide support. She ushers me out of her room immediately and starts laughing, cause he was sitting in there to observe her next class. In my junior year of college, I was working on a team project with a classmate who was a senior. I was supposed to turn in the project to our professor, but apparently I forgot. This caused us to get an F for the project, until I turned it in later and he could give us an actual grade. Unfortunately, this temporary F caused my teammate to fail the course, and for whatever reason this prevented him from graduating. So he had to graduate a quarter later. Vegas. Second to last row for a Blue Man Group show. The people behind us were talking loudly the entire show. They were basically giving a play-by-play of everything going on. We shushed and glared repeatedly to no avail. By the end of the show we were so mad that we were going to throw some harsh words their way. The lights come up. We turn around. There was a group of people and their obvious chaperones. This was a group of blind people. Many of them had no eyes. We slipped away feeling just awful about our behavior. We really should have apologized. Every time I get angry at my mum. Just 3 seconds ago I had to stop myself from responding a Redditor parent that their child's Halloween costume is really f***ing ugly. I was super young, maybe 6ish, so I probably shouldn't still be beating myself up over it. But the thing I always go back to as a point of humility is the time I was disappointed in the puzzle I got as a Christmas present because I was expecting more from my grandpa and started crying. I didn't even really mean to and wasn't making a scene out of it. I just got my hopes up a lot and started blubbering when they didn't meet expectations. When he noticed, we ended up doing the puzzle together and I had a pretty good time. So I was upset over nothing. He passed about 2 weeks ago, so it's been on my mind a lot. Was working the register at a restaurant and the guy asked, how much is this gonna cost me? I responded, an arm and a leg. The guy was missing half his arm. Told a girl I liked her accent and asked her where she was from. She told me she had a speech impediment. When I told the hairdresser that I don't like my haircut as a kid. You had f***ing balls of steel as a kid. A friend of mine had openly told me repeatedly they were in love with me. I was in a very unstable period of my life, and extremely should not have been in a relationship. The friend was also not innocent here, and definitely did not respect my rejections for months. But one night while I was very drunk, they brought it up again. And in that state, I agreed to try. Oof. You can't try a relationship with someone if you're quite certain you don't have feelings for them and they're quite certain they're in love with you. I f'd up and hurt them bad. When my son was about 3 months old, I was out walking with him in his stroller. My anxiety was high and I had pretty bad postpartum depression. This kid on a skateboard was skating toward us. He was maybe 12 or 13. He was skating like he was just going past us and he was really going fast. He came within inches of the stroller. Just flying. If he had lost control he would have crashed right into my newborn. Once he got just barely past me, I spun around, locked eyes with him and growled, "What the FCK?" Full stop. I'll never forget the shock look on that kid's face. He had meant no harm by it. I cried when I got home and felt terrible. This was like 8 cents years ago. If you're reading this, skateboarding kid, I'm really sorry. Okay, so my husband and I, when we first started dating, went out to a super fancy restaurant. One that at the end of your meal takes your plate, boxes your leftovers for you, and brings it out in a bag. A few nights later we went to another restaurant. Not as fancy. We were lost in conversation when the waiter came over to ask if we needed boxes for our leftovers. Me, completely not thinking, lifted up my plate to hand it to him, thinking he was there to take it, box it up, and bring it back. Not that kind of restaurant. Definitely one that would bring you a styrofoam container, pack up your own tea. This poor waiter, so kind and confused, took my plate and walked back to the back room. He brought it back out a few minutes later nicely boxed. My husband, new boyfriend at the time, was shocked. Like, what kind of asshole am I dating? Stopped mid-sentence and stared at my ashlery. When it dawned on me what I'd done, I've never been more embarrassed. To this day I still wonder if the guy spit in my food. The moment I realized I was a bully throughout elementary, middle, and high school. That was a really shameful day. Edit. I thought I was being playfully mean. Turns out I was being a downright asshole. Took me a while to figure out the difference. I got lucky and one of the kids I bullied flipped the FCK out on me in elementary school. I honest to God thought we were friends until he was screaming about how tired he was of taking my shitty. Felt twice as bad because I was bullied too and swore I'd never be that asshole. But I was literally at the moment I made that promise bullying some poor kid who was afraid to come to school. One time when I was 8 I yelled at my mom because she made a birthday cake that said Super, my name, because I liked Mario a lot. She felt so guilty and now that I think of it, that cake was very well done. I tell her sorry from time to time when I think about it again. But I just can't get over how rude that was and I feel so f***ing bad. I beat the actual shitty out of a kid who was a grade below and about a foot shorter than me in middle school because he hit my sister. Granted, he was a little asshole, but I held him against the wall and punched him in the nose until he was bleeding everywhere. That's when I learned I have anger issues. Driving home from work, stuck in rush hour traffic. My wife points out one of those dancing clowns with the advertising boards right outside our window. He was loving his job, dancing with not a care in the world, even waving at us poor schlubs. I thought he was great. He actually lifted my spirits, so I figured I'd wave at him too. Yeah. I flipped him off. I have no idea why it came out that way and I didn't mean it to. It just f***ing happened as traffic was starting to move again. I could see him in my mirrors. He was holding his hands out as if to say, "WTF dude?" Apostrophe. Poor fella must have felt so defeated. I honestly didn't mean to do it. And my wife called me a prick. Hope he doesn't turn into the Joker or some shitty. I went to the homecoming, USA, dance with this guy that was super nice as friends, but thought it was just a pity ask. A bunch of other girls were drooling over him, so I tried to give him space and not be clingy. One of his friends had to pull me to the side to tell me it was super mean to ditch the homecoming king at the dance. Cue the ultimate facepalm. I thought I was just not being annoying. Edit. To add insult to injury, I was exhausted from working that night before the dance and passed out on the couch at his friend's house at the after party that was entirely parent supervised.